I'm Jessica the Museum Guide, and today I'm at the wonderfully festive Charles Dickens Museum, which is all decorated for Christmas. Today, we're going to step back in time to Christmas 1837 in one of the most magical museums in London, and I'm so happy to share it with you today. If you'd like me to do a more in-depth video about Dickens and his work, let me know in the comments section below. But today, I'm going to focus on this cozy residence here on Doughty Street and its wonderful period Christmas decorations. Dickens and his growing family lived here from 1837 to 1839, and it's where Dickens finished writing the Pickwick Papers, which would make him famous. He also wrote Nicholas Nickleby, and most famously of all, Oliver Twist while living here, before moving to a grander house in Devonshire Terrace and then to Tavistock House nearby. This house was nearly demolished in 1923, but it was purchased after fundraising efforts and converted into a museum in 1925. It's absolutely wonderful, one of my favorites in London, especially at Christmas. If you enjoy this video and other videos about unique and interesting museums, remember to like and subscribe. Let's start here on the ground floor with the dining room. Dickens and his wife Catherine, known as Kate, loved to entertain, and it was here in the dining room that you could often find them sharing roast beef or lamb chops with their friends, fellow writers and artists. The room is elegant and curved and currently set for 6 people, although the couple did manage to seat 14 here once. Today you can see that he and his guests are preparing to eat a roast turkey, which had become the most fashionable bird to eat at Christmas by the 1840s, slowly replacing the goose. In fact, in A Christmas Carol, the Cratchit family first had a goose. However, you might remember that by the end of the book, Ebenezer Scrooge gives the family a turkey because it was bigger and more important. We can see a plate of mince pies and, of course, a lovely Christmas pudding for dessert. There are more goodies downstairs in the kitchen, which we'll visit shortly. Here we can see some subtle holly berries decorating the grandfather clock. Natural greenery decorations were common during early Victorian Christmas celebrations, as people were eager to harken back to the Christmases of the Tudor past. This impressive bust lets you know that this young man, he was only 26 when he lived here, is on the way up. Dickens was becoming increasingly famous, and he loved the finer things in life. As we head into the morning room next door, we can see a lovely basket of decorations ready to deck the halls. The room is already looking lovely with greenery on the mantel. Here's a chair that belonged to the couple, as well as the intricate carpet patterns. While the dining room may have been a place for Charles and Kate to entertain, this morning room was very much where Kate liked to spend her time. Here is a display case filled with her personal effects and jewelry, as well as another bust of her husband. I find this portrait here really fascinating. You can see the embroidered overmantel she's working on in the portrait and the very same one in the display box below. Wow. The room is decorated beautifully with portraits of the family, including the handsome couple above the hearth. Now, before we head upstairs to the more opulent rooms on the first and second floors, let's go somewhere more interesting, into the basement, where we'll find the kitchen. In most houses of this income level, the master and mistress of the house would rarely ever see this part of the home. However, Kate Dickens was an avid cook, and she even published a cookbook in 1851 under the pseudonym Lady Maria Clutterbuck. This room is lovely and homey, and you can just imagine the smells of goodies like pie and puddings. Baskets of fresh vegetables and fruit dot the room, and the shelves and cupboards are decorated with ivy and other fresh greenery. The Dickens had 3 live-in servants, a cook, a maid, and a nursery maid, as well as a male servant who lived nearby. The staff would have spent their days working here in the kitchen, cooking delicious food that you can see on the table. However, did you know that most of these Christmas dishes, like mince pies, figgy puddings, and Stilton cheese, would have been common throughout the year in the mid-19th century? While mince pies and other puddings like these were considered festive, they didn't stop appearing at other times of year until the late 19th century. Now, let's step into the scullery, where the servants would have prepared food and also done the dishwashing. The Dickens had a very modern house here on Doughty Street, so they actually had running water, but it was still an incredibly laborious job for the women who worked here. Now, this room is also in the process of baking and preparing delicious food for Christmas. We know that Dickens thought highly of people from all walks of life. His working class and poor characters, many of which are servants, are kind and warm-hearted, and we know he treated his own staff well. After all, he too was from very humble origins, which we'll talk about later on. However, this was still a very labor-intensive job for the women working in the kitchen and in the washhouse, where we will visit soon. Thankfully, they've decorated it so that their workspace looks pretty and festive for the holidays. And look at all these treats. Now let's pop outside for a moment to the wine cellar, which was a very important place for Christmas entertaining. After all, this is where Dickens stored his wine, but also his champagne, sherry, and brandy that were the social lubricant of his many gatherings. Those sound like my kinds of dinner parties. He wrote, after one Christmas party, "I arrived home at 1 o'clock this morning, drunk, and was put to bed by my loving missus." We've all been there, Charles. The washhouse is where the most laborious work of the house would be carried out. We can see the big tub here called the copper. A maid would have to carry buckets of hot water from this tub upstairs to Dickens' bath, located in his bedroom. My back aches just thinking about it. However, the copper also had a festive use at Christmas time. It was used to cook the Christmas pudding, which Dickens describes in great detail in A Christmas Carol. He says, "The two young Cratchits hustled Tiny Tim and bore him off into the washhouse, that he might hear the pudding singing in the copper." For my non-British friends, what exactly is a Christmas pudding? Well, it's not a Jell-O pudding cup, I'll tell you that. It's a dark, dense sponge that's quite sticky and rich, like a fruit cake. It's made from dried fruit, candied peel, apple, and citrus zest, as well as warming spices and a lot of brandy. It's then steamed and topped with brandy butter, custard, or cream, or if you're my husband, all three. Here you can also see the clothes hanging to dry. This would have been a very busy part of the house. Let's make our way up the stairs, back up to the first floor. We are now entering into Dickens' study. This small but stately room was the most important in the house to Charles. This is where he worked every day between breakfast and lunch and brought his stories into the world. Oliver Twist and Nicholas Nickleby were handwritten in this very room using a quill pen and ink. And what blows my mind is that he often wrote 2 books at once. You can also see a selection of his works on display, as well as some of his favorite books. This is just a fraction of the collection held by the National Dickens Library, also held here at the museum. And did you know that he wrote 5 Christmas books? Here we can see his impressive desk, though he didn't actually own it while he lived here at Doughty Street. At his Gad's Hill home in Kent, he wrote A Tale of Two Cities and Great Expectations sitting right here. Above the fire, we can see a portrait of Dickens at this very desk. The painting is called Dickens' Dream, and we can see his most famous characters swirled around him. It was painted just after his death in 1870, and in a tragic turn, the artist R.W. Buss died before he could finish the work. Let's walk into the most festive room of all, the drawing room. It's so lovely and Christmassy here. I just want to pull up a chair and have a brandy by the roaring fire. Oh, but don't worry. As a former curator, I would never dream of touching anything. After dinner, Dickens' guests would come upstairs to have some more drinks, and they would sit around this piano where they would sing and crack jokes. Dickens even did impressions. He was quite the ham and became a celebrated public speaker later in his life. Have a look at this reading lectern that he had made specifically for his public readings. He wanted to connect with the crowd and have them see his entire body as he performed, rather than being hidden behind a podium. Let's have a look at this enormous mirror over the fireplace. His daughters write about how he would use the mirrors in the house to create characters, pulling faces and testing out dialogue. How wonderful to think about that in this mirror. On the walls, we have wreaths and a gorgeous Christmas tree. These weren't yet very popular in England in the 1830s, as I explained in my video on Christmas customs at the Museum of the Home. But Dickens was high society by now, and he certainly would have been hobnobbing with the rich, who were also starting to decorate trees for the holiday. Here's a quick peek at Dickens' closet, holding some of his clothing for special events, perhaps the speaking gigs I just mentioned. But here we're entering the master bedroom, a place of relaxation and respite. It's where Charles and Kate could finally have some privacy in this busy household. They ended up having 10 children before their separation in 1858. But during this period, in 1837, they were incredibly happy and wrote sweet letters to each other, talking about how much they loved their children and their life. In this room, we can see many different private moments, including the commode chair between the windows, and the bathtub, where that water would have come upstairs from the washhouse. There's also a little piece of holly on the pillow, adding a sweet Christmassy element to the room. Now we're entering into a bittersweet room. The Mary Hogarth room. It's a blast of pink, soothing, calming. This was the bedroom of Catherine's 17-year-old sister, who lived with the couple here on Doughty Street. It was common for a woman's unmarried sisters to live with her and help care for the children. Here you can see her portrait, which is also hanging on the wall beside the bed. One night, after taking Kate and Mary to the theater, Dickens heard a cry coming from this room. Mary was visibly very ill, and despite the doctor coming over straight away, she died the next day in Dickens' arms as he comforted her. This was a massive shock to both Kate and Charles, and they were plunged into deep grief. Charles would go on to memorialize her as idealized characters in many of his books. She was Rose Maylie in Oliver Twist and Little Nell in The Old Curiosity Shop. Though Dickens wanted to be buried alongside Mary in Kensal Green Cemetery, public opinion demanded that he be buried at Westminster Abbey. Her dressing gown here is a poignant reminder of her absence. And now I'm heading up the stairs one last time to our final room, the nursery. Though this room is the nursery, decorated with colorful paper rings, a popular children's Christmas decoration at the time, it is also a museum exhibit featuring scenes from Dickens' own childhood. One particularly important period occurred when he was 12, and his father John, you can see his bust here, was imprisoned at Marshalsea Prison for not paying his debts. This is a set of bars from that prison. A young Dickens was forced to work to support his family. He worked at a blacking factory and lived alone in a small room in Camden Town. Here are examples of some of the types of pots he would have made. Over the fireplace, beyond this delightful dollhouse, is a portrait of Dickens and his own children, to whom he was a doting father, as well as a painting of his beloved pet raven, Grip. He would read to his children in this room with the bird on his shoulder. We can also see a small child's bed and a doll. His children had a life of luxury far beyond anything he could have imagined on his long walks from Camden to the Riverside factory when he was a boy. He was able to give them lavish Christmases, like the one we've witnessed here at the museum today. Well, that's the end of our tour. I hope it put you in a suitably festive mood and you're inspired to go read A Christmas Carol. I'll see you the next time I'm at the museum.